Welcome to the Week 4 mini lecture in 7512 NSC Aviation Leadership and Communication. This week we're going to be advancing on to what we call the contingency leadership theories. So in the previous lectures we've looked at some of the basic theories such as the traits and the behavioural theories, and we said in lecture 1 that the model then moved on to contingency leadership theories, then to the integrative theories. So simply by the evolution, we can see that these are going to be important. So what are we going to be doing in this? Well, first of all, we're going to be stating the major difference between the behavioural theories that we studied back in lecture 1, and we touched on also in lecture 3, and the contingency theories themselves. And we'll be saying what contingency really means. We're going to be describing some of the different types of contingency theories. Whilst the whole class is called contingency, one of the people that developed a model called it a contingency theory. So we have a contingency theory within a contingency theory, which just goes to show that academics can often get confused themselves. We have the Hershey Blanchard theory, the continuum theory, the path goal theory, and the normative theory. So we're looking at 5 different ones, but what you'll see as we go through is there are lots of similarities. That is, that people often build on someone else's work, and so whilst there are 5 different theories, there are a lot of similarities, so they're not too hard to understand. We'll be looking at the similarities and differences amongst them and comparing the 4 major differences amongst the 4 of these particular models. We're going to be saying as to which models are prescriptive and descriptive, and we'll go into that more when we come to the full lecture, and explaining why they're classified as such. And we'll talk at the end about the substitutes and neutralisers of leadership. Now that sounds interesting in itself. But the one thing that we find is that very often, if the situation doesn't suit us exactly for a leadership style, there are certain things we can change. And that's the skill in leadership, being able to read the environment that you're in and being able to change it. So let's take a look at it. What are contingency leadership theories? Well, first of all, they attempt to explain the appropriate leadership style used on the leader, the followers and the situation. So contingency itself means it depends. That is, in a certain situation, I might use this style. In another situation, I might use another style. So this is the thing about leadership. Nothing's rigid. You as the leader read the signs around you and you decide what sort of style fits this situation. So the thing is, the contingencies, that is different situations, affect the leadership style. For example, if you were driving along the road and you see an accident's just happened and you pull up and there are a number of other cars pulled up and there are people groaning and lying injured in the car, there's smoke coming from under the engine compartment, but people are standing there stunned, and you suddenly say, no one's doing anything. And suddenly you take over and you say, you, get onto 000 and call the emergency services. You, help me get this door open, get these people out. Suddenly you've taken charge in a certain situation and people may respond to you who've never met you before. So this is something that we often find, that as leaders, we might be put in a situation where suddenly we're put in charge of a team we've never met before, but we've got to get a job done. So if we look at the framework, we've got a number of variables. We've got the followers. And as we'll find out with the different models, capability makes a difference with followers. And also, what's their motivation? Are these people who are really keen to help you get the job done? Or are they people who always say, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it and I won't do anything more? We've got the leaders. And as we said back in lecture 1 and lecture 3, there are certain personality traits that affect leadership behaviour. And there's the experience of the leader themselves. And very often, people doing these courses are new to the leadership game and they're going out into jobs in the future where they don't have a lot of experience behind them. So how can you make up for that? Then we've got the situation. And in the situation, we're going to be looking at a range of variables, but particularly we'll be looking at the task itself, the structure. By structure we mean, is it something that's repetitive or is it something that each time something is different? Then we're looking at the environment itself. For example, does the task need to be done straight away where we don't have time to think about anything else? Or does the task have enough time where we might say, well, this is a good chance for a learning situation for one of my followers, and I'll help them do the task themselves as part of their development. So if we look at the first one, Fiedler actually called his model a contingency leadership model, even though it's one of a number of models within it. And what Fiedler looked at was, he looked at, first of all, the followers. What is the relationship between them? That is, do the followers know the leader well, respect the leader, like the leader? Or are they pretty new? Such as we said in that situation where you pull up at an accident and you've never met these people before. And that happens in the workplace. You often put in a task where you've never met them before. The leadership styles. Are you task-oriented, going back to our earlier models from Lecture 3, or are we relationship-oriented? And then the situation. What is the leader-member relations? What is the task? Is it repetitive or a non-repetitive task, such as in research and development? And what's our position power? Is it strong? That is, we've got a lot backing us up. Or is it weak? That is, we've suddenly been put into a situation where people don't know a lot about you and there's been no paperwork to show what your delegations are. The leadership styles. In the lecture, what we're going to do is we're actually going to give you a little survey that you can do on yourself. And you can find out just in 15 minutes as to whether you tend to be a task-oriented leader or a relationship-oriented leader. Now that's really important for you, because neither of them is right or wrong. People are born with different traits, as we said, different ways of thinking. And so you might be a little bit tending towards the task side or the relationship side. But the big thing is, once you know what you are, you can make adjustments and change your leadership so you might be balanced between task and relationship. This is an important thing for your own development, so it's going to be good for you, isn't it? We come to Tannenbaum and Schmidts Model. Now this fits in what we did back with the University of Iowa model. Iowa looked at whether you were autocratic or democratic. Tannenbaum and Schmidt said, well, you can be autocratic or you can be participative, that is, democratic, but you can have varying shades in between. Now that's important because very often this model, we can see this in everyday life. People will adjust depending on the situation, and depending on what they know about the followers, they might simply say, I don't know these people, I'll simply sell, this is the job, this is how you do it, this is when I want it done by. Whereas other people might say, this is the job, how do you think it should be done? I've got my own ideas, but I want to think, I want to find out what you think. So this is a good little model too. It's got some criticisms, and the one thing is that it's very subjective, and that's what we'll spend more time on in the actual lecture itself. We come to the Hershey Blanchard model. This is a really popular one, and basically this takes a look at, first of all, the followers themselves, and it looks at, first of all, what are their abilities? Are they able or unable at a particular task? And also their motivation. Are they willing or unwilling? And depending on where they fall in 4 different scales, that is able and willing up to unable and unwilling, as shown on the chart here, we can say, for example, if you're unable and unwilling, you might take a telling approach. If you're unable but willing, you'll take a selling approach and show the people you can actually do this job. That is, I'm going to show you how to do it. If they're able but unwilling, you might take a participative approach so that they can see what the importance of the task is and get their motivation up. And finally, if they're able and willing, you might say, well, I'll take a delegating approach. So basically it shows that your observation of the followers, and this is one of the things about leadership that we've been saying, how you observe your followers and how good you are at that is really going to make a lot of difference. And once you can do that, then you can say, I know which of the 4 approaches I can take. And that's the skill of being a leader. If we look at House's path goal theory, this looks at a whole range of factors. It looks at the followers as to how they respond to authoritarianism. Some people don't like it. What's their locus control? We did that back in lecture 1. Are they self-driven or are they pretty much follow where life takes them? And what's their ability? We look at the situation itself. What's the task structure, the formal authority, the work group itself? A little bit like Fiedler's theory. So as I said, each of these really has similarities to the others. And then finally it says you've got 5 different styles. For example, Hershey Blanchard said you've got 4 to pick from, Tenenbaum Schmidts said you've got 7. This one says you've got 5 to pick from. So again, we'll be showing in the lecture as to how you can apply this. If we take the normative model, here we've got a lot more factors. And of course in this mini lecture we don't have time to go through them all. But the situation, this one, is time driven. That is, does the task need to be done immediately? And of course, if the task needs to be done immediately, you don't have time to sit around and say, let's look at all the different ways we could do this and get a more participative approach. Also, you don't have a chance to give people development experience. But if time's not important, you might say, my job as a leader is to help develop my followers. So what I can do here is to ensure that I give people a chance to perhaps do the task themselves rather than me as the leader be there to give all the direction, and it helps develop their skills and also helps them achieve their career direction for the future. Now, of course, the thing is that what we've been looking at here is a whole range of different things in the situation. And what we find is that as leaders, that if you remember I said, if you're too job-centred, you can take action to change from being just job-centred to more relationship-centred. And the leadership substitute theory says that if the situation doesn't exactly fit your leadership style, then perhaps you can change the situation. So the one thing that we know is very often we end up in a leadership situation where factors are outside our control. We're given a group of people, we have no opportunity to pick them, or the task. If we had to pick the task that we wanted to, we'd pick the task we're best at, but often we're given tasks where we're not often the best. So what we find is that things can often happen outside our control that tend to neutralise our behaviour. That is, the situation doesn't favour us. And so what we can do is we can say, well, what are things we can do? For example, we can change the situation itself. We can look at the task itself and say, well, it's an unstructured task at the moment, but if I sit down and I write a new process, it becomes structured. Or the followers, if they're not motivated, what I can do is I can motivate them up. Or if my power is weak, I can make sure that I get all the delegations to increase my power. So these are the things that we can change. And so this lecture is a really important one. There are a number of theories there, but they have a lot of similarities. And what it's showing you is, again as a leader, you have to be able to read the people, the situation, and then say, okay, I can use this style. But the important thing is that if things aren't exactly the way I want, then if I have the time, I can change them. So this lecture itself, with all those different models, there's similarities, but there are differences, and how we can change things to suit the situation can help you understand leadership far better and be a much better leader for the future. Thank you.